Gilbert Arenas was drafted in 2001 as the 31st overall pick by the Golden State Warriors after 2 standout years at the University of Arizona. Despite his obvious offensive gifts in college, he averaged roughly 16 points per game as a sophomore and led Arizona to the 2001 NCAA championship game. NBA scouts were unconvinced he could transition seamlessly to the pros. Critics cited his smaller stature for a shooting guard, an inconsistent outside shot, and concerns about his defensive commitment. Dropping to the second round left a mark on Arenas. He took it personally, vowing to prove every team that passed on him wrong. In his rookie season with the Warriors, Arenas immediately demonstrated flashes of star potential. Despite playing behind established veterans, he was relentless in practice, reportedly arriving at the team facility before sunrise to hone his shot. His scoring instincts were clear, a quick first step that let him blow by bigger defenders, a knack for finishing at the rim, and a budding three-point shot. Although Golden State was one of the weaker teams in the league at the time, Arenas started getting regular minutes by mid-season. By the end of his rookie year, he was frequently scoring in double figures and showing a leadership quality that belied his draft position. The real turning point came in Arenas' second season, 2002-03. Freed from the bench and given more control of the offense, he burst onto the scene, averaging over 18 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds per game. That performance earned him the NBA's Most Improved Player award. Suddenly, everyone was talking about Gilbert Arenas, the late draft pick who was making a name for himself in Oakland. His confidence and flamboyant style were impossible to ignore. He would shoot from just inside half-court without hesitation, talk trash to bigger-name opponents, and carry himself with the swagger of a first-round pick. Offensively, he was a revelation, explosive, fearless, and craftier than many expected. However, salary cap rules ultimately prevented Golden State from matching an offer sheet Arenas received in free agency. The team had tried to free up the necessary cap space to keep him but fell short. Arenas, in a move that would define his career's next phase, signed a lucrative contract with the Washington Wizards in 2003. Joining the Wizards gave him something he craved, the mantle of franchise player. In Washington, he immediately became the centerpiece of the offense. During his first season there, he averaged nearly 25 points per game. The Wizards had been languishing at the bottom of the Eastern Conference for years, struggling to find an identity despite having had Michael Jordan on the roster briefly. Arenas' arrival injected excitement and hope. Teaming with Larry Hughes and Anton Jameson, he helped guide the Wizards to the playoffs in 2005, their first postseason appearance in nearly 2 decades. Fans in the nation's capital embraced him as a savior. Arenas' skill set evolved rapidly in Washington. He developed an even deeper shooting range, unafraid to pull up from well beyond the three-point line, and refined his driving ability. His first step, combined with a crafty handle, made him lethal off the dribble. He would often weave through traffic, splitting double teams and finishing with acrobatic layup. Defenders struggled to predict whether he'd blow by them, pull up for a jumper, or fling a pinpoint pass to an open teammate. He also became known for his late-game heroics, sinking numerous clutch baskets in the final seconds of tight contests. Fans dubbed him Agent Zero, referencing the jersey number he chose to represent the 0 minutes opponents predicted he would play in the NBA. The name stuck, evolving into a personal brand that captured his underdog spirit. Between 2004 and 2007, Arenas transformed into one of the league's premier scoring guards, making 3 NBA All-Star teams and earning multiple All-NBA selections. His scoring averages were routinely in the high 20s per game, and he cemented his reputation as a big-game performer. One particularly unforgettable moment came in December 2006, when he poured in 60 points against the Los Angeles Lakers in an overtime victory. Squaring off against Kobe Bryant, Arenas sank big shot after big shot, ultimately outdueling one of the game's greatest scorers on his own home court. That evening set a franchise record for the Wizards and put the entire league on notice. Gilbert Arenas was not just a good scorer, he was an offensive juggernaut. Off the court, Arenas' personality was equally attention-grabbing. He was a relentless prankster, once filling a teammate's bathtub with coffee beans. He would blog openly on NBA.com about everything from basketball tactics to personal anecdotes, giving fans a candid insight into his world, a rarity at a time when social media was still in its infancy. He showcased a playful, irreverent sense of humor that engaged younger fans, but sometimes ruffled feathers with coaches and more traditional executives around the league. The Wizards rewarded him with a massive contract extension in 2008, 6 years, over $100 million. The franchise saw him as the cornerstone for years to come. Yet, cracks began to appear that same year. In the 2007 playoff, Arenas tore the meniscus in his left knee, beginning a saga of surgeries and rehabs that took a toll on his explosiveness. Over the next 2 seasons, he played in fewer than 20 games total. The Wizards, once a promising young playoff team, slumped in the standings without their star. By the time Arenas finally made his full return to the court in 2009, expectations were mixed. He flashed moments of his old brilliance, but he wasn't quite the same unstoppable scorer who could drop 40 points on any given night. He said publicly he was still dealing with lingering knee pain and rust from extended absence. Despite those hurdles, he could still score in spurts, dropping 30 points some nights and showing glimmers of his vintage style. style. Then came the incident that permanently marred his reputation. In December 2009, Arenas and teammate Javaris Crittenton had a dispute over a card game debt during a team flight. The argument escalated after landing, and Arenas brought firearms into the Wizards' locker room, allegedly laying them out in a mocking manner. Crittenton also had his own gun, and the situation quickly spiraled. The story leaked to the media, causing uproar among fans and across the league. Commissioner David Stern suspended Arenas indefinitely, labeling his action as conduct detrimental to the NBA. Local authorities got involved, and Arenas eventually pled guilty to a felony gun charge. He served probation, avoided jail time, but the damage to his image was irreversible. The once charming Agent Zero was suddenly the face of a major scandal involving guns in a professional sports environment. Sponsors dropped him, and public sentiment shifted. In an attempt at damage control, he apologized repeatedly and tried to downplay the situation as a childish prank gone wrong. But the NBA was not interested in nuance. The league had to protect its image. He was suspended for the remainder of the season, effectively severing the Wizards' commitment to him. The Wizards, looking to rebuild, drafted John Wall as their new franchise centerpiece in 2010. Arenas returned briefly the following season, but no longer fit into Washington's future plan. In December 2010, the team traded him to the Orlando Magic, hoping a fresh start might revive his on-court production. But his athleticism was diminished by knee injury, and he never found a rhythm in Orlando. He was eventually waived in 2011 via the league's amnesty clause. The Memphis Grizzlies took a low-risk chance on Arenas in 2012, signing him to bolster their bench for a playoff push. He showed a few flashes, hitting some key shots in limited minutes, but by then he was far from the all-star guard he once was. After that season, no NBA team offered a viable contract. At just 30 years old, Gilbert Arenas's NBA career was effectively over. In retrospect, Arenas's career can be divided into two distinct chapters. The first is his meteoric rise, the second-round pick turned perennial all-star, the scoring dynamo who led Washington back to relevance, the larger-than-life personality adored by fans for both his comedic flair and his killer instinct on the court. The second chapter is the precipitous fall, the knee injuries that robbed him of his explosiveness, the gun incident that led to suspension and legal trouble, and a series of trades and signings that never allowed him to resurrect his prime form. Even so, the influence of Arenas remains visible in modern NBA guard. He was an early adopter of ultra-deep three-point shooting, a style made famous later by Stephen Curry and Damian Lillard. He played with an unabashed confidence that, at the time, was both admired and criticized. He showed that second-round picks can become superstars, shifting how some organizations evaluate overlooked talent. And he was among the first NBA players to fully leverage digital platforms to connect with fans, foreshadowing the rise of personal branding in sport. Yet his legacy will forever be tinged with what if. Some argue that if he hadn't had multiple knee surgery, he would have continued dominating well into his 30s. Others say that if he'd managed the locker room gun situation differently, he could have remained a beloved figure rather than a cautionary tale. For a span of about 4 years, Gilbert Arenas was one of the league's most electrifying scorers, capable of dropping 40, 50, or even 60 points on any given night. He had a swagger that drew fans in and made every Wizards game feel like a spectacle. Unfortunately, everything unraveled too soon. The knee issues severely limited his mobility and quickness, key components of his offensive skill set. Meanwhile, the gun controversy overshadowed his achievement, casting a shadow that even his earlier all-star success couldn't fully dispel. By the time he was 29, Arenas was a shell of his former self on the court, and the Wizards had moved on to a new generation of players. Today, fans look back at the Agent Zero era with mixed emotion. He remains a vivid memory of a showman who could catch fire and score from anywhere, a player who turned doubters into believers with every 30-point performance. But his career also stands as a warning of how swiftly fortune can change in the NBA. Injuries, off-court decisions, and the unforgiving nature of public perception combined to derail a path that once seemed destined for the Hall of Fame. Gilbert Arenas will always be remembered for that electric run in Washington, highlighted by all-star appearances, playoff battles against LeBron James's Cleveland Cavaliers, and unforgettable buzzer beater. He'll also be remembered for a lapse in judgment that ended his marriage with a franchise that once saw him as their marquee star. In a league that celebrates redemption story, he never quite found the narrative arc that could restore him to his past glory. Instead, his story became a blend of underdog triumph and personal implosion. Whatever the final assessment, there's no denying his impact. For a brief period, Gilbert Arenas was among the NBA's most must-watch players. His legacy, complicated though it may be, reminds us that talent alone doesn't guarantee longevity, and that a single moment can forever redefine a career, no matter how dazzling it once was.